Dunc Holder, hour number 2. On a Thursday, March 15th, Larry Holder, Clyde Verdane here with you. Jeff will return to the mic at some point next week, whether he's not held over by customs in London. I don't know if we're trying to smuggle in too much. I don't even know. What would you smuggle in from London? That's actually worth smuggling in. Crumpets? Tea?
Some tea. They make these really very, very quality, real buttery shortbread cookies.
How about the Queen's Crown?
Yeah, now we're talking.
That's worth it.
This is a national treasure, okay?
Can we have him say pip pip cheerio when he comes back?
Exactly.
The most thing he can probably steal is a really terrible British accent like Madonna.
Maybe Austin Powers' teeth. I don't know. Maybe we can get that from London.
Yeah, baby.
That would be glorious. But, yep, so he'll be back next week. But joining us right here on the show, we haven't even gotten to every storyline through free agency, but to help sift through everything on Josh Katzenstein, NOLA.com, and Times-Picayune, who's been busy crushing it for us, doing an awesome job with our own Herbie Teope.
Not sleeping.
No, absolutely not. Josh, let's start with the rumor now, according to Ian Rappaport, NFL Network, about Ndamukong Suh. What do you make of the connection there? And I'm assuming you're familiar with his reputation, given he's a former Detroit Lion and you used to cover the Lions up for the Detroit News before you started working here.
Yeah, you know, it's interesting. When I first saw that the Dolphins were planning on cutting him, I thought that he was probably going to be a good fit, mostly because he's the most disruptive defensive lineman available. I mean, he's a stellar football player. There's no doubt about that. The problem is that, you know, his reputation, you know, is pretty spot on from everything I saw in Detroit. And it sounds like, you know, it hasn't changed at all since he's been in Miami. That he's a selfish player, you know, not necessarily a team-first guy. Cares more about his business interests, you know, not more than football, but, I mean, he cares a lot about his business interests. And I don't know, you know, first of all, that, you know, he'd be able to thrive, you know, outside of football in New Orleans, just because, you know, there aren't a lot of Fortune 500 companies here. You know, I've always thought that, you know, he wanted to get back to Seattle. I mean, he's a Portland guy. You know, he's a big Nike guy. You know, something on the West Coast or New York or Miami even made sense when he made that deal. But, you know, someone told me on Tuesday that the Saints weren't going to be interested in him just because, you know, they've built this locker room so well, you know, with young, team-first guys, you know, unselfish guys. And I think that, you know, he might not necessarily fit in that, you know, just because, you know, all of a sudden if you pay this guy so much money, you know, he becomes the example whether you like it or not. So I would be surprised if these reports of the interest are true, just because I had heard that they weren't going to be interested in him. But I guess, you know, we'll find out exactly what's going on here pretty quickly.
Josh, of the moves that the Saints have made so far, which do you like the most? Outside of Drew Brees, obviously.
I like the Patrick Robinson signing, honestly. I mean, I think that was a good price, you know, for a legitimate need that they had. I mean, they needed, you know, someone who can play in the slot and cover slot receivers. You know, obviously Patrick Robinson was stellar last year at that for the Eagles and helped them get to the Super Bowl. He also played, you know, some outside when there were injuries in that secondary. So, I mean, he's a versatile player. Obviously, he's significantly improved since he was here the first time. And I think, you know, if you add him to this young defense, you know, he can help some of these younger defensive backs, you know, learn and grow a little bit. And I think that, you know, one of the reasons the Saints, you know, didn't love Kenny Vaccaro, I mean, obviously the penalties, the injuries, but, I mean, he wasn't that fast. And all of a sudden, you know, if you look at, you know, the defensive backs that they brought in the past 2 years, they're clearly emphasizing speed, and Patrick Robinson is definitely a fast guy.
Josh, along that same front, you know, I know yesterday when the news of Demario Davis came through, I know specifically on Twitter you had a lot of people who were who saw his numbers but were maybe a little unconvinced that bringing in Patrick and or bringing in Demario Davis, guys who have really stellar numbers but maybe had, quote, inconsistent type play before, they weren't sold on it. But clearly these both Robinson and Davis have the wherewithal and quality that the Saints are probably looking for. Were you surprised, more or less, that the first two moves, or the first two big moves after Drew Brees, that the Saints did were both on defensive players, such as Demario Davis and Patrick Robinson?
No, of course not. I mean, I think they still need to add, pieces to the defense even after signing those guys, which is, the one reason, as I said before, the Suh thing might make sense. But ultimately, with Davis, I think, that was a really good signing. I think, we're going to find out, exactly how he fits in the defense. I mean, right now, I would say he's the favorite to be the Mike linebacker. Would probably kick A.J. Klein over to Sam and Manti Te'o to a backup role. But, I mean, we look at, the linebackers they brought in, and durability has been a huge issue. I mean, pretty much everyone, all these linebackers that they brought in the past few years haven't been durable except Craig Robertson. And I think that, Demario Davis, look at what he's done, between the past 4 years. He did, 4 of the past 5 years with the Jets and then 1 with the Browns before the Browns traded him back to the Jets. He started all but 1 game the past 5 years. So this is clearly a durable player. Last year was the most productive year of his career. I mean, that's the one concern, with these free agent deals is when you're playing a guy, who has a monster contract year, you never know if he's going to get it back. But, I mean, really the Jets defense, was not, the biggest issue with that team. I mean, their offense has been problematic pretty much the whole time Davis has been there. So I think, the defense has been fine, and he's been a reason, why that's the case. So I definitely think he's a guy that can help the Saints.
Josh Katzenstein covers the Saints for NOLA.com, the Times-Picayune, joining us right here on Dunc and Holder. Josh, if you look at the move for the Saints as far as a backup quarterback, Chase Daniel's moving on, Tom Savage is moving in. What do you make of the swap and the prospects of the Saints being in position to potentially draft one come the end of April?
I don't expect them to draft somebody. I mean, I think if you just look at, where they're picking, they have the 27th pick. Most of the, top quarterbacks, I'd say there's like a tier of 5 quarterbacks. I think most of those guys, if not all of them, will be gone by the 27th pick. And then, beyond that, I mean, you basically just have a lot of Garrett Graysons, guys that, aren't probably going to ever start in the league. I mean, they might develop into good backups, but definitely not anyone that I would think is capable, being the long-term replacement to Drew Brees. So I don't expect it to happen. I think, they're content to have Brees and then hope that either Savage or Taysom Hill can prove to be a fine backup. And then, they'll spend their draft picks on players that can hopefully contribute something this year because, they're hoping, obviously to get to the playoffs and then contend for a Super Bowl again. So they want to, fill as many holes around Drew Brees as possible. So I don't expect a quarterback to come. As for Savage, I mean, he's a guy with starting experience. So, I mean, that's something, that's valuable. But it's a one-year deal. Obviously, they're just, hoping that he can do something better than what he showed when he was starting, some of those games for the Texans. I mean, this guy's not that great, but, certainly, the Saints are not hoping, that he ever plays it down. They want Brees, in there, I guess, unless it's a blowout or something. But, I'm curious to see how the competition goes between Savage and Taysom Hill come training camp.
Oh, by the way, you had a chance to ask questions of Drew Brees yesterday. Normally, we'd be talking about that throughout much of this show. It's been buried because it's probably the 18th, 19th story now on NOLA.com in our Saints section. But what did you make of Drew Brees' comments for the questioning you guys did with the conference call yesterday?
I mean, it was nothing really surprising. He basically said that, he always wanted to stick with the Saints. And, obviously there were some other teams that had interest. And, he thought it was, interesting just to be in that realm again and hear what other teams are saying. But, it was, typical Drew Brees interview. He's just, shares a few thoughts but doesn't tell it all. He wouldn't say how long he's planning on playing, but he says he has a goal and a vision. So, whether, we'll see exactly what that goal and vision is. But obviously I think, if the Saints win another Super Bowl, that could certainly impact it.
Absolutely. And Josh, honestly, I guess where do the Saints go from here now in terms of you've got Drew Brees locked up, you're starting to make moves in free agency, and then obviously the draft is really looming large now. Where do you see really the Saints going now in terms of what do they do with the rest of free agency, and then how they attack free agency affect what they do in the draft?
Really, right now, I don't know. I mean, that's another reason I don't know about this Suh interest. I mean, obviously they could, do something creative to free some space, but they don't have that much space right now. So I think, they'll definitely scour the market. They'll probably bring back, Zach Line or John Kuhn or both. I mean, they have a hole at fullback with both those guys being free agents. They'll probably bring back a cheap defensive end, whether it's Alex Okafor or someone else. They'll just keep looking for pieces. I mean, you remember, there will be cheap guys they sign that don't count toward the top 51 salaries, so they don't, necessarily count toward their salary cap. So I'm sure they're looking, in the bargain bin right now. I mean, Kirk Coleman, Demario Davis, Patrick Robinson, those are guys that, cost, they will definitely count on the cap, but, they're reasonable moves. They didn't, seem to overpay for those guys. So I think they're going to keep looking for signings that, fit basically what they've been doing.
Josh Katzenstein covers the Saints for NOLA.com and the Times-Picayune at J. Katzenstein, a must follow. He's been swamped along with our own Herbie Tiopi doing a fantastic job. Josh, appreciate you jumping on the show, and I'd keep a lookout for those Barry Sanders to the Saints moves. I think that's going to be next.
Okay. I mean, I don't know. Would he get the ball more than Alvin Kamara and Mark Ingram?
I bet you he'd be better than Adrian Peterson. Boom. I just had to throw a shot at AP. Sorry. Had to do it.
Of course you did.
Of course you
I did. I'm that petty. All right, Josh. See you. Thanks for the insight. All right, let's take a break right here on the show. Seriously, it's right here on Twitter. Barry Sanders better than AP right now.
That's not what it says. I'm looking at your screen. That's not what it says.
That's what I'm reading.
Then clearly we need to take you into the closest psychiatric ward and have you tested.
They've said beyond repair, but they let me walk, so it's all good.
Okay, yeah. I was about to say, what kind of medicine did they give you? Because for your back and stuff? Because we have some questions.
Pez.
Oh, they gave me those fake, what is it, birth
Placebos?
control pills?
Placebos?
Yeah,
Basically sugar
they
pills?
gave me a bunch of those. And some candy cigarettes so I could wean myself off of smoking even though I don't smoke. That's the gateway drug to...
I have so many questions about your personal life, it's not even funny that we can't get into right now.
My friends would be more than happy to divulge and just embarrass.
I'm going to get those people on the show. Hopefully they'll be there Friday at our crawfish boil.
So, speaking of crawfish, Troubadour Hotel Friday. Head to the rooftop bar, the Monkey Board, 1111 Gravier Street. We'll be eating some crawfish. Myself, Clyde, Dave will be there starting at 5 o'clock. $25 gets you 3 pounds of crawfish, 2 local draft beers. They'll be selling them till the crawfish runs out. And only for Dunc Holder listeners, you can get and reserve a cabana for you and your friends for $500. Mention Dunc Holder, and you get it for $500. Otherwise, you don't, you'll be paying more. So do yourself a favor and mention the show. So come on back, Sports1280NOLA.com, the iHeartRadio app, Dunc Holder.